and welcome to Long Live the Queen, where we talk about the women who made history. And by we, I mean the royal we, because it's just me. Today, we're going to talk about Eleanor of Aquitaine.
One day we will be remembered.
So he went to Champagne and attacked, and 1,300 men, women, and children barricaded themselves into a church while their houses burned down around them. They were like, well, we'll be safe, I guess. But Louis's army was shooting fire arrows like into their thatched roofs. Buildings were burning down. Now, this is a Christina's conspiracy theory. It's not mine because I didn't come up with it, but there's two schools of thought.
Okay.
One, they were shooting fire arrows everywhere, and somehow on accident, the church roof caught fire. Or they were shooting all the roofs, and someone was like, yeah, burn that church down too. But either way, the church with the 1,300 people in it caught on fire. And burned down. The people couldn't get out. Like, they were barricaded. Like, we're talking like nailed
like
boards on stuff, right? Because they were like, there's an army outside burning everything down. Like, we're not safe. So they couldn't get out. So 1,300 men, women, and children burned alive inside this church. And reports of the time say that there was screaming, there was awful smells. I mean, this was straight up horror right in front of your eyes. And the king was traumatized. He had, like, quite a large amount of PTSD from this.
I bet.
Because he's now the super religious guy who got kicked out of the church and then burnt 1,300 people alive in a church.
In a church?
Yeah. So he was like, oh, this is not going to make the Pope want me back anymore. The king likely had PTSD from this for the rest of his life. It really, really, really bothered him. So right around this time, people started suspecting that Eleanor was a little bit witchy. Like, the king's acting weird. This super religious guy gets excommunicated, then burns down a church. Like, it must be his wife.
Of course.
Witch. Isn't that how it always goes? It seems like an easy thing to do, be accused of being a witch back then.
Because you're not following the status quo.
Yeah, like, be normal. I am not normal. But then things got worse, because then there were rumors that she was having an affair with Geoffrey Plantagenet, Count of Anjou. And if that name sounds vaguely familiar, that's because the English royal family Plantagenet is from this guy. This is where it came from.
Right.
Empress Matilda, who was the daughter of the King of England.
Henry I.
Yes. So, but they're not in charge yet because Matilda, she had boobs. So
right.
It was a whole, the White Ship disaster and then that whole Civil War. It's a whole thing. We should do that next.
Well,
we should do that episode next.
Well, Eleanor gets into that, right?
Yeah.
Because she marries Henry II.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if she did have a relationship with Geoffrey Plantagenet. Geoffrey Plantagenet was quite a bit older than her. He would have been I think he would have been 29, and Eleanor would have been about 18 by this point. And he was married to Empress Matilda.
Oh.
But also, maybe my guy had a type, because Empress Matilda, Eleanor of Aquitaine, they're both wealthy heiresses who had powerful fathers.
Mm-hmm.
He might have just had a type. He might have been like, well, maybe she's my backup. Empress Matilda was getting a little older, so maybe he thought, this 18-year-old can be my backup plan.
Okay.
And then I can just collect all the land, because through Empress Matilda, he was obviously trying to get England.
Right.
If he also got Aquitaine, and he already had Anjou, because he was the Duke of Anjou. So that's like a large portion of what we consider France and all of England. So I think there was a collection situation going on. And he had to get them all, like Pokemon. Because of his marriage to Matilda, his son was going to be King Henry II. But he isn't now. But later that will be extremely relevant.
Yes.
If this happened, if she got with Geoffrey, she would have been 18, like I said, and he would have been about 29, and that gives me, like, Taylor Swift, John Mayer vibes. Remember when Taylor Swift was, like, 18, and she dated John Mayer, and he was, like, 30? That's what this is like, I feel like.
I mean, at least she's legal.
Yes, and she's, like, married, like you said, married adult at this point. She had some agency. She was the Queen of France. The Duke of Anjou couldn't just be like, get with me.
That's bold to go after the Queen of France, though.
It is. It is. So Eleanor had her first baby since her miscarriage 7 years earlier at the age of about 21, which I'm glad for that, at least, that there was... It's unfortunate if she had that miscarriage at 14, but it would make sense. But then her husband not being that into sex, I'm happy for her, which could explain the Jeffrey Plantagenet thing, honestly, if she just felt
True.
lonely.
I mean, yeah.
Because by that point she was 18, and maybe she just wanted some kind of
Well, and if he's
attention.
dealing with all this PTSD and,
All
this
his religious trauma, yeah.
Right, then he doesn't have a lot of time for her.
No. So this baby was strong and healthy and perfect and female. So France was like, no, thank you. France was definitely no girls. That you could not have a queen regnant of France. It was against the law. So the royal couple had Princess Marie. And the year after the little princess was born, word came to France that the Pope wanted more crusaders because it was time for the Second Crusade.
Okay.
And Eleanor's husband, with all his religious trauma and PTSD, was like, I'm in. I'm in. Because you go on crusade. If you die on crusade, free ticket into heaven, according to the Pope. So he was like, yeah, I could use that free ticket because I don't have a good record at the moment. So the King of France, with all his religious trauma and PTSD, wanted to go on crusade because he was sort of back in the church now, but he's at the bottom of the popularity list. So he needed the crusade help.
Not Pope's favorite person.
No, not even a little bit. That church burning did not help things, believe it or not. And Eleanor's husband announced excitedly on Christmas Day that he was going to go on crusade. He was just like, hey guys, Merry Christmas, I'm going on crusade. Which, I don't know, I guess it was a big deal to him, right? So he's probably like, ooh, right. I'll announce it at the holiday when everyone's around. Why gotta bum out Christmas like that, you know?
Depends on who wants him still at court or not.
That's true. Maybe everyone's like, nice, best present ever. And then Eleanor, who you would think would be like, nice. She has a 1-year-old baby. She's like, I'm going to go too. I'm going to go with you. And I don't know how he felt about that. He loved her. He looked at her like, oh, you're just like the best thing ever. Maybe he was excited.
Or maybe he's like, why are you horning in on my vacation?
This was supposed to be a guy's trip. So, and also he had decided that he was going to be chaste during this trip to the crusade. He was not going to have sex at all during this trip.
Okay.
So maybe he was like, why you got to be there? Like, I'm trying not to have sex and my wife's just following me around.
Now, is this when she supposedly, during the Second Crusade, rode bare-breasted into battle?
Supposedly, yes.
Okay.
Because she was like, I'm definitely going on crusade. And this wasn't unheard of. Women did sometimes go on crusade. Like, there was the Peasants' Crusade, and that was just all kinds of people.
Right.
So women did go. It wasn't as common. It was definitely mostly a guy thing. And
I guess I should mention that the reason that she wanted to go, if she did go bare-breasted, is because she was trying to emulate the Amazons.
Yes. And they have compared her to an Amazonian warrior princess, kind of like a Wonder Woman.
Okay.
And so it could just be the story was told and then it got a little more spicy and then it got a little more spicy. It could have been that.
She's the kind of woman who would wear armor like that.
Yeah, definitely. She would look like in those video games, you know, the female armor was always like skimp. She probably, because she liked style. She wanted to look good. And the king was like, okay, well, we can't go now on crusade. Like all of a sudden he's less excited. Because it's winter, which makes sense. I mean, you can't just, they're in France in winter, right? So, but he's like, okay, but let's wait till Easter. Like, and I just find it funny that she's like, yeah, me too. And he's like, okay, in 4 months.
Maybe she'll lose interest.
Yeah, maybe she'll change her mind. She'll be like, oh, wait, crusade, that sounds lame. Because his kind of crusade does sound kind of lame. No offense to the people who like his kind of crusade. But he dressed like a beggar on purpose because that was the look for crusade.
Okay.
And he didn't bring anything fancy. He was really like roughing it. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't like a roughing it kind of girl.
She sounds like me.
Yeah. She was more of a glamper, if anything. She liked nice things, and her crusade was different. She was going on crusade, though, not as the Queen of France. She was going on crusade as the Duchess of Aquitaine, meaning she had her own army. She had an army. Her husband had the French army. She had the Aquitaine army, and her army was arguably larger. She brought her ladies with her. She brought nice things. They were glamping, crusade style. And her husband was not. So between her and her husband, somewhere between 25,000 and 50,000 pilgrims left France to go on crusade for the second crusade, which is 50,000. Can you imagine? Like, how do you even provision for that many people? And it's two distinctly separate armies. So it's not like you can just be like this. Like you have to have two separate governing councils of armies.
Right.
So by October, so they left on Easter in the spring. They made it to Constantinople in October because they're all walking. I mean, some of them have horses, but not all of them.
Right.
So it took them basically 6 months to get to Constantinople.
So they walked all through Europe. They didn't take any boats.
Some of their retinue did take boats, but the large portion of their army was like a group of pedestrians. And Constantinople would be the place where you would stop right before you entered Asia Minor. So that would be like your last, like this is our last save point, basically, before we enter the war. And they had to stop at Constantinople because of some people came by boat and they weren't there yet.
Okay.
The boat people were slower, probably because they were probably like, we're taking a boat. We have tons of time. Like, we'll get there in time. They're walking. So by that point, they had met the Germans and they were together, the French and the Germans, who were also going on the Second Crusade.
Okay.
Now, the Germans did not want to wait for the boat people. They were like, we want to go on crusade. And they kind of wanted the glory. Like, if we get there first, maybe we can win. If you show up and you're not needed, we look good. So the Germans were like, bye. And the French waited.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Yep, exactly. And this was already in October. By October 15, all the French were together. So it wasn't even that long, and the French were right after. It's kind of like Amazing Race. Like, go, go, go. The Germans have left. They just left.
Yeah.
We can catch them. That's what it feels like to me. They're trying to get back into the pod, like when we go on our trips.
Yes, that's right.
So the Germans were gone. The French were hot on their tracks. And the French headed south until they ran into the Germans, who they last saw in Constantinople. And the Germans were in a bad way. They were losing, and they hadn't even left that long ago. It's like if you're in the Amazing Race and you're like, go, go, catch the Germans, and then you drive 3 blocks, and then you see them with a flat tire on the side of the road.
Oh.
Like, oh,
Au revoir.
maybe we weren't in a hurry. But the French were like, okay, well, A, this looks like it's going to be harder than we thought because the Germans are getting their butts kicked by the Turks. And B, we don't want to be jerks like the Germans and just ditch them. So they're like, okay, look, send your injured people back to Constantinople, which was a majority of them. And the people who are still good and still want to go on crusade, they can join us.
Okay.
So they were like French with a little bit of German flavoring. And the French, combined with what was left of the Germans, continued south. By the end of the year, though, because this was October, right?
Right.
By the end of the year, most of the Germans had turned around and gone home. Like, no, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And I don't know, to be fair, if they joined the French army, that was probably a lot less fun than if they joined the Aquitaine army, being run by Eleanor. Yeah. So I don't know. If I'm a German, I might head home too. I might be like, my king's not even here. It was fun while it lasted, but I think this trip's over.
Yeah.
So they lost most of the Germans within a month or two. King Louis was a weak and ineffectual military leader with absolutely no skill for maintaining troop discipline or morale or making informed and logical tactical decisions. He was like, look, I'm a man of God. I'm here for God. But he was in charge of the French army, so he needed to do more than that.
You would think he would have some cabinet or something.
You would think. And I'm sure he did, but apparently not good ones.
Oh.
Eleanor's army was much better equipped because she did have guys, like she was running her army, but she wasn't the one running the army. She had commanders and they were just better. Mm-hmm. And at one point, her army just slowly got more and more ahead of Louis's army because they were just more organized. And they got to a certain spot when they were trying to cross into another area, and they didn't wait where the natural waiting place, like a summit or something, where they would naturally wait for Louis to catch up, they didn't wait. So their road trip caravan was getting farther and farther apart. And while they made it through just fine, Louis's army got attacked by the Turks. And they lost a lot of lives. They lost a lot of their baggage train, like just gone.
Yeah.
They lost supplies and people, and the only reason that Louis got away, partially luck, but partially because he was dressed like a beggar. They didn't know who the king was.
So they couldn't pick him out to ransom him.
Nope. So he got away because they were just like, who's that random? That random was the King of France. And when he caught up to Eleanor, he blamed her. He was like, oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. You ditched me, and look what happened. And she was like,
They're like, you're lucky I brought my army with me.
yeah. She was like, yeah, I don't think this is working out. Maybe we get divorced. So she didn't take it well either.
Mm-mm.
And so then,
So I heard, I read there was a rumor about her that while she was in Outremer, I think that's how you say it, that she had an affair with Saladin.
I heard that too, actually.
He was only 10.
Yeah, I heard that it's unlikely because he was very young.
I mean, that's just another one of those salacious rumors.
Right? I feel like they're just
pin on
like, oh,
her.
this lady's going off on crusade. She's definitely banging everyone. But I don't think she was. But
No.
yeah, all the
Not a
rumors were
10-year-old
about
for
her.
sure.
That's why we have 100 pages of her from that long ago. No other women from then have 100 pages. By the time they reached Antioch, which is where they were headed to go help with the crusade,
Right.
their military was way small. Like, all the Germans were gone pretty much, except for a few. And Louis' army was small. Eleanor still had a considerable portion of hers, but
Mm-hmm.
there was no longer 50,000 people in this group. And Eleanor's uncle was the ruler of Antioch. That's who they were going to help.
And that would be Prince Raymond of Toulouse.
Yes, that would be her father's brother.
Okay.
And he was described as a lord of noble descent, of tall and elegant figure, the handsomest of princes of the earth, a man of charming affability and conversation, open-handed and magnificent beyond measure.
Ooh,
So he was a popular dude. They liked him.
sounds like it.
And that was her uncle. So she got on really well with her uncle. It's unclear how well they knew each other before this, because they lived in very different places.
But I imagine that meeting up with someone who's from her region was
Yeah, they would have
just,
spoken the
refreshing.
same dialect.
Yeah,
It probably would have felt like she was home again.
right.
Like, these people get me. And she already wanted a divorce from her kind of lame husband. So she was like, oh, it's my people. So word on the street was that they were sleeping together, Eleanor and her uncle. I feel like that was, again, one of those rumors that just like,
Right,
oh, look how much she likes her uncle. They must be sleeping together.
right.
The reason people thought that they were together in the biblical way was because they talked a lot, which, okay, like people from home, like we said, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
It's
it
probably
seemed to
nice
be
to hear her own dialect.
right. And it seemed to be more from her uncle than from her. Her uncle was always talking to her.
Okay,
And she was engaging. She was having a fun conversation. She was engaging back with him, but he was always talking with her. That's pointed out that it's not, she wasn't always in search of him. He was just always in her ear talking to her.
well, and that seems to make sense because he's kind of stuck there, and like
Right.
somebody from his home
Yeah.
comes
the
to him.
same
He
thing.
wants to talk. He wants to get the news.
Yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. And also, remember, her army's better than her husband's.
Yeah.
So if he's
Gotta
trying to get
butter her up.
help, she's the one he
Yep.
wants help from.
Yep.
And Louis didn't like it. Louis was like, no, absolutely not. This is inappropriate. Like, don't be acting like this. And he decided that instead of going where her uncle wanted them to go to fight, Louis wanted to go to Jerusalem because it was almost Easter. And he wanted to spend Easter in Jerusalem because he's super Catholic. And like, come on, who wouldn't want to spend Easter in Jerusalem, right? Especially then. This was
Right.
a once in a lifetime thing. When
Absolutely.
else was he going to be in Jerusalem around Easter? So he was like, no, we're not going to go fight with your uncle. I don't care that that's what you want to do. We're going to Jerusalem. And she was like, no, I'm not going. And then that just fueled the rumors more. Like, why does she want to stay with her uncle? Why doesn't she want to go to Jerusalem with her husband and spend Easter? But Louis made her go. He's like, no, you can't stay here. You're my wife and you have to go. And he made her go, which not totally sure how, because again, she had the bigger army. It seems like she could just be like, well, my army says I'm staying here.
Well, I read a little. I don't know if it was this or when they were leaving the area to go back home. But at one point, she wanted to stay behind, and he was mad. And he said, "Why are you renouncing me?" And she says, "Why do I renounce you? Because of your fecklessness. You are not worth a rotten pear."
Yes.
And
That
that
was
is my
this
new
time, I
insult.
think.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, right? Rotten pear. That's
And then
rough.
she was kidnapped by his people.
Yes, yes,
Good.
that's true. That's true. I mean, she was definitely forcibly removed. I just,
Right.
again, she
Right.
had an army. Like, tell your army, hey, if I go missing, kill
Right.
my husband's army because they're real small. But so she went to Jerusalem, spent Easter with her husband, who he's not even worth a rotten pear. So she's with him for Easter, but probably not loving her life. And when they left back for France, they took separate ships,
Oh.
which I feel like is taking like two separate private planes.
Okay.
They didn't even want to be on the same ship as each other. They were on different ships.
Well, from what I understand, they both met with Pope Eugene III on the way back home. And he offered marriage counseling and a bed draped with his own personal curtains, which I feel
That he
is
had
just
blessed.
ultra creepy.
Yeah.
Like, here, have sex in my bed with my personal curtains
Not only that,
watching over
he
you.
basically promised them that they'd have another baby. Like, have sex in my magic Pope bed, and you'll have a baby, and it'll fix your marriage. This is why you shouldn't ask unmarried men for marriage advice.
Nope. Sometimes not even married men.
Accurate. Guess what, though? She got pregnant in the
With
magic Pope bed.
Alex?
Yep,
Was
with
it
Alex.
Alex? Countess of Blois?
Yeah, so another girl.
Wah wah.
Not a good look when you're in France back then. And she was like, look, I really want a divorce. And I think you will all agree that us having a second girl is a sign from God that God wants us to have a divorce too. And the Pope and the King were like, yeah, that's a valid argument. Like, I see where you're going with that. Okay. And
Well, they granted that on the basis of consanguinity.
yes,
Consanguinity.
they were
How do you
related.
say that word? But they were
Consanguinity, I believe.
cousins.
He's your cousin.
They were third cousins once removed. So they
Okay.
were related in the fourth degree.
Right.
And I think during the Catholic Church back then, you couldn't get married if you were within the seventh degree. So
Oh,
it
really?
wasn't even like fourth degree counted, which is way more than it is now. That would your sixth cousin once removed, that would be seventh degree. The Pope would say no, unless you were
Wow.
a king.
I don't even know who my sixth
Right?
cousin once removed would be.
Now I think most states are like second or third cousins at that
Right.
point. But they didn't have the science back then, so they didn't know. They were just like, look, let's play it safe. So they were related in the fourth degree. That was the official reason. That was her reason. She was like, we're related. That's why God doesn't want us to be together. And our daughters are proof that God doesn't want us to be together.
Mhm.
Which, how lame for their kids. Like, can you imagine?
know.
But, unlike Henry VIII, her daughters were not declared illegitimate.
Okay.
Because according to the Pope, they had married in good faith. Like, nobody knew that it wasn't a good idea. Now that we have the God information with all the daughters, you know more, you do better, you know? So
Right.
they were like, your daughters can stay. They were conceived in good faith, basically. And like one in the magic Pope bed. So how are you going to make that kid illegitimate? And the king was still against divorce. He still was like, I don't know. I mean, that's a valid argument. All these girls, no one wants that. But he was essentially against sex, even marital sex. He thought sex was a necessary evil, that it was always evil when you did it, even if you were married, even if you were trying to have children. And one of the Catholic Church rules at the time was sex was only allowed for children.
Oh.
That was part of why you couldn't have sex just whenever you wanted. You couldn't have sex while you were pregnant because you were already pregnant. You weren't trying to have more babies.
Okay.
And you couldn't have sex, I believe it's 3 or 4 months after having the baby. You weren't supposed to have sex, which is how we know
Well.
some people cheated, because some people like, and 9 months later they had another baby. And you couldn't, there's just so many rules. So
Right.
anytime she got pregnant, she was not having sex for a year, at least, minimum. And because he thought it was evil.
At least not with Louis.
Yeah, definitely not with it. Maybe with Jeffrey Plantagenet. And everyone said that he loved the queen so much. This was like a love story of the ages, except he loved her like he was a little kid or a puppy. He thought she was the most beautiful, most perfect thing on the planet,
Right.
but not in a sexual way. So Eleanor had her second baby, finally everyone agreed to this divorce. Like, yeah, I mean, God's being pretty clear. If God wanted us together, we would have had a boy, right? So obviously that was our answer. We asked the magic Pope bed question, and God came back with a solid girl. So the answers were done. And the king wanted boys because he needed an heir. Because again, only boys. His daughters were not going to be Queen of France. That was not an option, even though they were still legitimate. Eleanor was only 26 at this point. She was married for 13 years. So she got married at 13. This was now half her life she's been married to this man. But she's only 26. And they were like, look, she's getting up there in age. She's 26. How many more babies can she have? And they're all coming out girls. It's not great. But I feel like the first decade shouldn't be held against her, first of all. She's a little girl.
Right.
She's 26. Like, cut her some slack.
I didn't have my first baby until I was 26.
I was younger than that. But 26, like, they're talking like she's like 53 at this point. Like, and no offense to the 53, solid. But at that point, yeah, maybe you're not going to have another baby. And they were risking it because if she did have another baby, what if it came out a girl again? What if God was like, no, I told you once, I told you twice, I told you thrice. No.
Yeah.
Here's your third girl. So, I mean, she basically had to beg him for sex because, again, he thought it was evil. So how fun is that experience? I'm guessing not.
Not fun at all.
No. And even the king's advisors were like, yeah, you need to get rid of this queen. She's no good. She's a rotten pear. Get rid of her. Replace her with someone who can have a boy. And it very much gives me like King Henry VIII, Catherine of Aragon vibes, except he's nothing like King Henry was like, yeah, let's get rid of this rotten pear. And he was just like, but I love you. Why doesn't God want us to be together, cousin? And so then in 1151, Henry, Count of Anjou, came to pay tribute to his liege lord, King Louis, who is the son of Geoffrey Plantagenet. So the man that she maybe had a thing with back in the day when she was Taylor Swift and he was John Mayer, now his son's here. And his son is 18 and now she's like 30. So now she's the John Mayer of the situation and the son is Taylor Swift. And also she may have slept with his dad. So she may have slept with this guy, Henry, the son also. Spoiler alert, eventually she definitely slept with him because they had children, but maybe at this time. And she maybe slept with his dad.
We know that they met at this time.
Yes, they met at this time, and word on the street was they were like people at the time were like, they like each other like she likes her uncle, which doesn't really mean anything. But
this virile young warrior comes to her court.
Right.
She's married to this old man monk. Even if he's not old, he seems old,
He doesn't like sex. And he's like, oh, why do you keep having these girls?
He's not a sensual person. He's not virile. He's not commanding.
Yeah.
And then she sees Henry, Duke of Anjou, and
she likes what she sees.
Or no, he was Duke of Normandy, right?
I think he was both.
Okay.
Because his dad was Count of Anjou, so he was also Count of Anjou, but I think he was also Duke of Normandy. Because with Anjou, Normandy, and Aquitaine, they would have like an L-shaped piece of France.
Okay. Oh, yeah, Duke of Normandy, Count of Anjou, Maine, and Touraine.
Yes.
Is what I wrote down in my notes.
Yes, he's both.
Okay.
So, and he was allegedly good looking. Tell me, what do you think of this description? This is supposedly what he looked like. He's of average height. He was considered, in a room of short men, he was not considered tall, but in a room of tall men, he was not considered short. So just a very average height. He was very, very muscular, stocky, he was wide, but in a strong way. Lots of muscles.
Sounds like my husband.
Right? That's why I was asking. I think he looked a little like your husband.
Will be remembered.
Thanks for listening.